There is a sound that haunted the battlefields of two world wars, a sharp crack that echoed through trenches, forests, and frozen plains, the sound of the Kar-98k. For millions of soldiers, it was the last thing they heard. This is not just the account of a weapon. It is the story of lethal precision transformed into steel and wood. It is the narrative of a rifle that shaped the destiny of nations and carried the weight of millions of lives on its trigger. The Kar98k. Kar-98k. A name that still resonates with reverence and terror in the corridors of military history. At the end of World War I, Germany was on its knees. The Treaty of Versailles of 1919 did not merely humiliate the nation, it disarmed it. The German armed forces were limited to 100,000 men. Armament production was severely restricted. German military pride lay buried beneath the rubble of a lost war. But among the ashes, something began to germinate. The Mauser Company, founded by brothers Wilhelm and Paul Mauser in 1872, had established an unparalleled reputation in bolt-action rifle manufacturing. Their Gewehr 98 design, introduced in 1898, had equipped the German Imperial Army for decades. It was robust, accurate, and reliable, but it was also long, too long for the new warfare tactics that were emerging. The military world was changing. The trench warfare of World War I had demonstrated the need for more compact, more maneuverable weapons. Soldiers needed something that could function in mud, in snow, in the suffocating heat of African deserts. Something that would not fail when life depended on a single shot. In 1935, as Nazi Germany resurged under Adolf Hitler, openly ignoring the restrictions of Versailles, the German army officially adopted a weapon that had been secretly refined for years. The Kar-98k was born not merely as a weapon, but as a declaration of German military rebirth. Mauser did not create the Kar-98k from nothing. It was a careful evolution, almost surgical, of decades of experience in precision armaments. The design was based on the Mauser bolt system, a masterpiece of mechanical engineering that had been copied and admired by weapons manufacturers around the world. Paul Mauser had died in 1914, but his legacy lived in every component of that rifle. The Kurz version, meaning short, in German, reduced the total length of the Gewehr 98 from 1.25 meters to 1.11 meters. It may seem like a small difference, but on the battlefield, those centimeters meant the difference between life and death. They meant being able to enter and exit trenches quickly. They meant maneuvering in urban combat. They meant survival. Mauser engineers worked on every detail. The wooden stock, traditionally made from European walnut, was sculpted to fit perfectly against the shooter's shoulder. The barrel, 600 millimeters in length, was manufactured from high-quality steel, rifled with 4 grooves that imparted stabilizing rotation to the projectile. The bolt system was a marvel of simplicity and efficiency. 3 large locking lugs ensured the chamber remained sealed, even under the extreme pressures of firing. The shooter could operate the bolt with remarkable speed. Experienced soldiers could fire up to 15 rounds per minute with acceptable accuracy. According to documents from the era, each Kar-98k underwent rigorous quality testing. Mauser tolerated no imperfections. Each rifle was tested with proof loads, cartridges with higher than normal pressure, to ensure they would not explode in soldiers' hands. But there was one characteristic that elevated the Kar-98k above many contemporaries: its exceptional accuracy. In the hands of a trained marksman, that rifle could hit human targets at 400 meters with frightening consistency. Elite snipers achieved lethal engagements at over 800 meters. It was a weapon that forgave no mistakes, neither from the shooter nor from the enemy. To hold a Kar-98k is to feel the weight of history. 4.5 kilograms of steel, wood, and deadly purpose. The cartridge was the 7.92 Kaufen 57mm Mauser, also known as 8mm Mauser, a heavy projectile, pointed tip, with a muzzle velocity of approximately 760 meters per second. When it struck a human body, the impact was devastating. The projectile did not merely pierce, it transferred massive kinetic energy, causing temporary cavities that destroyed tissue far beyond the bullet's path. The internal magazine held 5 cartridges, fed by disposable steel clips. The shooter pushed the clip through the top of the action, the cartridges dropped into the magazine, and the empty clip was automatically ejected. Simple, efficient, combat-tested for decades. The sights consisted of an adjustable rear sight and a protected front sight post. The range adjustment went up to 2,000 meters. An optimistic mark, considering few shooters could achieve effective accuracy beyond 400 meters. But it demonstrated German confidence in their weapons' capability. One of the most subtle innovations was the bayonet. It was not merely a sharp blade attached to the barrel. It was a piece designed to maintain the rifle's balance even when fixed. In hand-to-hand combat, the Kar98k with bayonet transformed into a deadly spear. But the true genius lay in reliability. The Kar98k functioned in temperatures below -40 degrees on the Russian steppes. It functioned in the scorching heat of North Africa. It functioned covered in mud in the trenches of Stalingrad. It functioned after being submerged in water, buried in sand, frozen in snow. Other rifles of the era, like the American Springfield or the British Lee Enfield, had their virtues. The Lee Enfield, for example, had greater magazine capacity and faster rate of fire, but few combined the precision, durability, and mechanical simplicity of the German design. There was, however, one crucial limitation. While the world began adopting semi-automatic rifles, like the American M1 Garand, Germany remained committed to the manual bolt system. Each shot required the shooter to manually operate the bolt. In close-range combat, this could mean fatal seconds of disadvantage. But the German High Command believed that single-shot precision was worth more than volume of fire, a philosophy that would be tested to its bloody limits. The Kar98k officially entered service in 1935, but its true baptism of fire came during the Spanish Civil War between 1936 and 1939. Germany, under the guise of the Condor Legion, sent troops, aircraft, and weapons to support Franco's nationalist forces. Among those weapons were thousands of Kar98k rifles. Spanish battlefields became testing grounds for German military doctrine and equipment. Reports from the conflict praised the rifle's performance. In the urban warfare of Madrid, in the mountainous terrain of the Pyrenees, the Kar98k proved its worth. Republican forces, often equipped with older Russian Mosin Nagants or captured rifles, found themselves outmatched by the precision and reliability of the German weapon. But it was on September 1, 1939, that the Kar98k truly announced itself to the world. The invasion of Poland. At dawn, German forces crossed the border with overwhelming force. Wehrmacht infantry, each soldier armed with a Kar98k, advanced in coordinated formation supported by tanks and aircraft. The Blitzkrieg, lightning war, had begun. Polish defenders fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The Kar98k, in the hands of disciplined German infantry, proved devastatingly effective. Witnesses described the methodical German advance, soldiers moving in fire teams, covering each other, their rifles barking with disciplined precision. One Polish officer, captured during the defense of Warsaw, later recounted, "They did not spray bullets wildly. Each German shot seemed deliberate, aimed. It was terrifying." The rifle that had been designed in peacetime secrecy was now writing history in blood. From 1939 to 1945, the Kar98k became the most produced rifle of World War II. Over 14 million units were manufactured. It equipped not only German Wehrmacht soldiers but also the Waffen-SS, Kriegsmarine sailors, Luftwaffe ground personnel, and eventually, desperate Volkssturm militia in the war's final days. Every major German campaign was fought with the Kar98k as the standard infantry weapon. In France, during the stunning six-week campaign of 1940, German infantry armed with Kar98ks overwhelmed French and British forces. The rifle performed flawlessly in the forests of the Ardennes, in the streets of Paris, along the beaches of Dunkirk, where desperate Allied soldiers evacuated under fire. In North Africa, Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps carried Kar98ks through the scorching deserts of Libya and Egypt. The rifle endured sandstorms that would jam lesser weapons. German soldiers learned to wrap their rifles in cloth, to clear the action multiple times daily, but the fundamental Mauser design never failed them. But it was on the Eastern Front where the Kar98k faced its greatest test. Operation Barbarossa. June 22, 1941. 3 million German soldiers invaded the Soviet Union in the largest military operation in human history. Each infantryman carried a Kar98k. The initial advance was staggering. German precision and training, combined with reliable weaponry, overwhelmed Soviet defenses. At Moscow, at Leningrad, at Stalingrad, the crack of Kar98ks echoed through streets and steppes. One German soldier, in a letter home discovered decades later, wrote, My rifle has not failed me once. In temperatures where our vehicles freeze, where our men's fingers turn black with frostbite, the Kar98k still fires. It may be the only thing I can trust. Soviet soldiers learned to fear that distinctive crack. The sound meant German infantry was near. It meant precision fire. It meant danger. But the Eastern Front also revealed the Kar98k's limitations. Soviet troops, armed with semi-automatic SVT-40s and PPSH-41 submachine guns, could unleash greater volumes of fire in close combat. In the brutal house-to-house fighting of Stalingrad, German soldiers with bolt-action rifles found themselves at a disadvantage against Soviet automatic weapons. The German solution was to pair Kar98k riflemen with MG-42 machine gun teams, creating devastating combined firepower. But the fundamental limitation remained. In a war increasingly dominated by automatic weapons, the bolt-action rifle was becoming obsolete. Yet it endured. It remained in production until the very end. If the Kar98k was deadly in the hands of ordinary infantry, it became transcendent in the hands of snipers. The Germans recognized early that exceptional marksmen could have strategic impact beyond their individual kills. They established sniper schools, developed doctrine, and equipped their best shooters with specialized Kar98k variants. The Kar98k ZF-41 featured a telescopic sight mounted above the action. Later models used more powerful optics, the Zeiss Silvia 4X, the Ayak 4X. These scopes transformed the already accurate rifle into an instrument of surgical lethality. German snipers on the Eastern Front achieved legendary kill counts. Names like Matthias Hetzenauer with 345 confirmed kills and Josef Sepp Ehlerberger with 257 became whispered with fear among Soviet troops. One Soviet officer's diary, recovered after his death, described the psychological terror. "We cannot see them. We only hear the shot after our comrade falls. They are ghosts with German rifles. We have stopped standing in open areas." The Kar98k's accuracy at range made it the perfect sniper weapon. The heavy 7.92 mm bullet retained lethal energy at distances where other rifles' projectiles lost effectiveness. The bolt action, while slower, was inherently more accurate than semi-automatic designs because there was no reciprocating action to disturb the shooter's aim. Soviet snipers, including famous marksmen like Vasily Zaitsev, often used captured Kar98k's when they could acquire them. The rifle transcended nationality. It was simply effective. In the ruins of Stalingrad, on the frozen forests of Finland, in the Italian mountains, German snipers with Kar98k's inflicted casualties far beyond their numbers. A single skilled sniper could pin down an entire company, making soldiers afraid to move, to sleep, to exist. The psychological impact was perhaps even greater than the physical casualties. By 1943, the tide was turning. Germany was fighting on multiple fronts, facing enemies with superior industrial capacity and increasingly advanced weaponry. The Kar98k, once a symbol of German military might, began to show its age. American forces landing in Italy and later in Normandy carried M1 Garand semi-automatic rifles. 8 rounds of .30-06, fired as fast as the shooter could pull the trigger. No manual bolt operation. In firefights, American infantry could maintain suppressive fire that German bolt-action riflemen simply could not match. British and Commonwealth forces, with their Lee Enfield rifles holding 10 rounds and famously fast bolt operation, also enjoyed firepower advantages. The Germans attempted to address this. They developed the Gewehr 43, a semi-automatic rifle, and the revolutionary Sturmgewehr 44, the world's first assault rifle. But these came too late and in too few numbers. The Kar98k remained the backbone of German infantry until the very end. As Germany's industrial capacity crumbled under Allied bombing, Kar98k production quality began to suffer. Late-war rifles often lacked the fit and finish of earlier models. Different manufacturers, including captured factories in occupied countries, produced parts that sometimes did not interchange smoothly. Yet even these cruder late-war Kar98k's remained functional. The fundamental design was so robust that even with reduced quality control, the rifles still worked. In the final months of the war, as Germany collapsed, the Kar98k armed everyone. Old men of the Volkssturm, boys of the Hitler Youth, all received the rifle that had once equipped the proud Wehrmacht. One American soldier, in his memoir of the Battle of Berlin, described finding a dead German defender. He couldn't have been more than 14, too young to shave. But he had a Kar-98k and he'd been using it. The rifle was probably older than he was. The weapon that had begun as a symbol of German military rebirth ended as a tool of desperate last stands. May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered. The war in Europe was over. Millions of Kar-98k rifles were captured by Allied forces. They were collected, catalogued, and distributed to armies around the world. The rifle's post-war life was remarkably extensive. Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, and other Eastern European nations continued using captured Kar-98ks for decades. Some were converted to different calibers, 7.62 751 NATO, or 7.62 54 or Soviet, extending their service life well into the 1950s and beyond. Israel, in its War of Independence in 1948, armed its forces with thousands of Kar-98ks acquired from Czechoslovakia. Israeli soldiers carried German rifles against Arab armies, many of whom also used captured German weapons. The irony was not lost on survivors of the Holocaust carrying the rifle that had once been aimed at them. France used captured Kar-98ks to arm colonial troops in Indochina and Algeria. Britain distributed them to territorial and home guard units. Norway, whose own Krag-Jørgensen rifles were similar in design, used Kar-98ks captured from German occupation forces. The rifle found new life in conflicts across the globe. In the Korean War, Chinese and North Korean forces used captured Kar-98ks. In Vietnam, Viet Cong fighters occasionally carried them. In the Middle East, in Africa, in South America, anywhere there was conflict, there were Kar-98ks. The rifle's reputation for accuracy made it particularly valued for ceremonial purposes. To this day, several nations use Kar-98ks in honor guards and military ceremonies. The distinctive rifle drill, with its long lines and sharp bolt operation, remains visually impressive. Civilian shooters embraced the Kar-98k. Converted to hunting rifles, they became popular for big game. The powerful 8mm Mauser cartridge was effective against anything that walked. Sportsmen appreciated the rifle's accuracy and durability. In modern times, collectors prize original Kar-98ks. Matching numbers, original finish, documented provenance, these factors determine value. A rifle that saw action in Stalingrad or Normandy carries historical weight that transcends its material worth. Shooting ranges around the world still see Kar-98ks fired regularly. The distinctive crack of the 8mm Mauser, the feel of the bolt action cycling, connects modern shooters to history. The rifle designed in the 1930s remained relevant into the 21st century, a testament to its fundamental excellence. More than 14 million Kar-98ks were produced. They armed armies that conquered Europe and defended it to the last. They were carried by 18-year-old boys and 50-year-old men. They killed millions and saved thousands. Every Kar-98k has a history. Every rifle saw things no weapon should see. Streets of Warsaw burning, fields of Stalingrad frozen with corpses, beaches of Normandy red with blood, villages in Russia, towns in France, cities across a continent destroyed. In museums now, behind glass, the Kar-98k sits quietly, cleaned, oiled, harmless. Visitors look at it and see merely an old rifle, wood and metal, historical curiosity. But those who know history hear something different when they look at that rifle. They hear the crack that echoed from Dunkirk to Moscow. They hear the sound that meant incoming fire, that meant take cover, that meant someone was about to die. They hear the last sound millions of soldiers heard before darkness claimed them. The Kar-98k was not the most advanced rifle of World War II. It was not the fastest, not the one with the highest capacity, not the most modern. But it was the one that showed up everywhere, reliable, accurate, deadly. It was the rifle that defined German infantry for a decade of warfare. The rifle that every soldier on every battlefield learned to recognize by sound alone. It was the weapon that carried an army across a continent and then carried that same army to defeat. And in the end, that is its legacy. Not that it was the best, but that it was there, in the hands of millions, on the bloodiest battlefields humanity has ever created. The Kar-98k did not start the war, but it certainly fought it every single day until the very end. And somewhere tonight, in a conflict zone half a world away, someone is probably still carrying one. Because some weapons refuse to become history, they simply become legend. The end. The crack of the Kar-98k echoed across battlefields for decades. In museums now, those rifles sit silent, but their sound still haunts the pages of history, a reminder that precision, in the hands of millions, shaped the destiny of the world.